So I assume you saw Jordan Peterson in Australia.
Yeah, that was actually one of the moments that, probably the moment actually, that turned me onto this path. Because, like I said, I did a lot of media, and I tried to go for it for about 5 years or so, and it wasn't really working out for me, if I'm totally honest. I'd never earned any money from it whatsoever, and I'd done hundreds and hundreds of episodes and thousands of hours of work, and pretty much all for free for that 5 years, just grinding away constantly, hoping that eventually something would stick. And then I'd pretty much given up. I'd gone into the corporate world, and I'd been working for 6 months in recruitment, and I was really hating it. And then I went and saw Jordan Peterson live, and actually that week I had the week off work because I had meningitis. Yeah,
Oh.
so I was quite sick. I was in hospital, and then I just made this Jordan Peterson event, and I was in a really low place because I'd just been sick, and I was really hating my job, and I wanted to quit, and but didn't know what else I wanted to do. I was 27 years old, and I just been living with my mum for a few months just to sort of, yeah, it was a weird time. And then my brother and I were driving to the event, and he goes to me, and I was just sort of venting, and he said to me, "I bet Jordan Peterson says something to you tonight that changes your direction." And I was like, "Oh yeah, whatever, who cares?" And then we got there. Jordan Peterson comes on stage, and when he does his talks, he talks about one of his rules every time he does that. And he goes, "The rule I'm going to talk about tonight is think about who you could be and aim single-mindedly that." So I thought, okay, here we go. And then for the next 2 hours or so, he proceeded to just talk in a way that felt like he was literally talking straight to me, reaching out his hands. So it was quite an experience. That was about a year ago, almost to the day.
Oh, so it was new. Yeah, I saw when he first burst onto the scene, and he did his first tour ever, and he came through Washington. I went to see him, and that was when a lot of people are following. Obviously, he had a big crowd, but the general public didn't know. Now, everybody knows his name, but back then, people that were following him knew who he was, but a lot of the general public didn't know. And I went there, and there was a big line. It was big crowded. But one thing I never, I watched a lot of YouTube videos with him, with Joe Rogan and other people, so I understood what he was about. But one thing that I never connected with him on in his YouTube videos is that the misery of life that he believed that everyone has, because I didn't have that, and I don't know anyone that has that. Everyone I know in my life, I know a couple of people have been killed in motorcycle accidents over my lifetime, but I mean, not the way he's talking. So I went to that meeting. I went to that presentation 5 years ago or something, and I was standing outside on the sidewalk talking to the people that had attended, and there's they're overwhelmingly 20-something-year-old males. I'd say it was 80% male, 20% female, and most of the males were in their 20s or early 30s. And they were talking amongst themselves. I heard many people say the same thing. They're saying, "Yeah, I really like this, that, the other thing, but I didn't understand all this negative stuff he's talking about. I didn't have any of this happen to me, and I don't know anyone." So I know he's had some really bad personal issues, and so is his daughter. I mean, I listened to them; they sound horrendous. But I think that for a lot of Westerners, Australians, Canadians, Americans, they haven't had. I mean, the life he describes sounds more like someone in Eastern Europe in the 1930s than it does the average Westerner. So that's an area that I don't really relate to him on. But I agree with him.
Yeah. I mean, that's it's. I think we can consider ourselves lucky that we don't relate to that on that level. But I think you'd know good and well if you just have a cursory glance at the world, and if you have a cursory glance at, outside of the Western perspective, and then throughout history, that is pretty much the norm, and that people have to contend with unbelievable misery and suffering. But in the sense that what he talks about appeals to a certain demographic, which is the Western person. But then along with that, I also do believe that people like you and I, who have done a decent job of adjusting into the world, and we sort of have our own networks of people who are also reasonably well adjusted. I mean, whenever I speak to somebody, unless there's somebody I love, like a family or a friend, and they're complaining to me, I'm repulsed by that. I don't want to really speak to them because I don't really know you that well, and I don't want to hear about your miserable life. And it sounds callous, but like you don't have time to, I don't have time to like, be everyone's rock. But if it's someone I love, then I'll take that time. So generally I stay away from that sort of thing, but there would be such an undercurrent of people who are really suffering that you just don't really hear from, that's sort of a little bit more living insular lives just in their houses and playing video games and sort of suffering in silence. I think that there would be a lot of that. We just wouldn't really see that much of it.
I think the thing that people are just so clueless about, especially in the Western world, and where Jordan's so accurate, is how life was for all of human history until like yesterday. I mean, 100 years ago, 70 years ago, whatever. I don't think the average person realized what life was like just for their great grandparents. You don't have to go back to like the prehistoric times. I mean, life was, you just go back 100, 200, 300 years. Life was horrible for like just living. Just, you had like so many problems you had to deal with.
Do you know what's funny about that? It's when I had this, I went on a date with this Ukrainian girl the other day. Normally the Ukrainian girls are quite like a little bit more based, but this one was a real feminist. She was from like the sort of, I can't remember where she was from. But yeah, she was real like staunch feminist, and I quite enjoyed that when we like have those back and forths. And she started telling me the narrative of, men have always oppressed us throughout history. And I was like, okay. I was like, that's interesting. Like how so? And she's saying that basically women were, held down and just sort of naked and barefoot in the kitchen. And I was like, do you know what life was like before the first industrial revolution for families? And I was like, did you understand that like more than 90% of human beings were farmers? And in order to be a farmer back then, you're earning less than $1 a day. You're living in abject poverty. And basically, before the steel plow was invented, men would basically just be in the farms 15 to 18 hours a day, just back-breaking work all day so that they could just put food on the table and avoid starving to death. And there was infant mortality rate was extremely high, disease, life expectancy was way lower. We had all of these things to contend with. And then to look at that history and to look at the fact that the women's job was more to take care of the children and make sure that they didn't die, and to look at that and then to be like the man was the oppressor, is just such a shocking way to look at history. It's just so incorrect, but it's something that's just burnt into the brains of young people these days, that it's just it's just this histrionics that we get about this like male oppression.
Yeah, and yeah. But and to this day, and when women spent a lot of time in the fields too with the men. I mean,
yeah,
right, just to get enough food to eat. You can go to, you go to Thailand where you are now, you go out in the rural areas, you see lots of women in the rice fields working. I mean,
it's true. We work together, had to work together.
Before modern appliances and feminine hygiene. I mean, this is where Jordan Peterson just nails it. I mean, feminine hygiene products, birth control. I mean, those are the things that liberated men, not women's liberation, is technology and progress.